Oh, hello.
Hello. Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. I'm just getting Zoom set up so people can see you on stream.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you actually because I read a bit of your bio before, and you do. I saw you did some photography and stuff, and
Yeah, it's another hobby of mine.
yeah, because I actually studied like media design at university. So one of the first things we got when we were doing it, we got like cameras and stuff, and we're all out taking photos around the city. And um,
Hmm.
yeah, I had a look at some of your stuff, and it was you like some of uh the nature scenes were really interesting. Like I actually live like right beside like a mountain, so I'm always going up there
Oh,
and taking photos and stuff.
oh, that's awesome. So
Yeah,
you live in New Zealand. Are you like on the countryside or in the city?
in the city at the moment. Yeah, but I grew up
Gotcha.
in the middle of the country. Yeah,
Very nice. I've always wanted to go to New Zealand, but I made it as far as Australia.
yeah. New
But
Zealand's a
it
bit out of
seems
the way.
like Yeah, yes. It seems like one of the most like photogenic countries just in terms of landscapes.
Mm,
I've always been into especially nature photography.
yeah,
So yeah, whenever travel becomes possible again, I'll have to make it over there.
yeah. You should. It's yeah. Everyone always yeah. You can go pretty much anywhere, and then the scene is just incredible.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Do you shoot with like a nice kind of professional camera or like more point and shoot or
I've got well, I still have my old camera, so at the moment, like I'm not much of a photographer now.
got it? Ah,
Yeah, so I have my old camera, which is a Canon, uh, and but I don't even take it out with me that much anymore. Like I just take stuff on my phone now. I'm a filthy casual photographer.
well, I mean these days everyone's a photographer with their phones. But it's still nice to sometimes distinguish your work if you do have like a nicer camera to use
Mm,
like once in a while.
for sure, and it just like feels good as well to carry that around for some reason. To
Right.
carry around
Yeah.
like a big camera.
Yeah. I've honestly I have not taken like like just nice photos in a while. Just it's been the nature of staying inside.
True.
No big events. Used to be very into whenever there'd be events in St. Louis.
Mm.
I live very close to the St. Louis Chess Club. Um, and when there'd be top level events, I just go over with my camera and photograph like these top level players. Like usually, like especially around this time of year, like August, there'd be all the top super GMs in town.
Mm.
Um, so it's a cool way to have some interesting Instagram content.
Yeah, I think I
But
saw.
I'll have to wait for that.
Yeah, I saw some of your pictures of that. It's pretty cool, like seeing the big name chess players and stuff. Yeah,
Right,
yeah
right.
on camera.
Have you ever been to like an in-person chess event like in New Zealand?
No, I haven't. I The most I did was uh I mean, I played in school. That was pretty much it. Like, I didn't even,
Mm,
not even like in a club or anything. Like, like, I think there was just like a random class competition when I was like 12 years old, and I played then. And that's the only
mhm.
time I ever touched chess. I
Oh,
think, um, and until like very recently with, I think there was sometimes where it just randomly popped up, and maybe I played with friends and stuff. Um, but until PogChamps, like I never really played at all.
mhm.
Mm.
I think that's the case with a lot of people is like they've learned in school, they learned how to play when they were young, and then didn't really get into it maybe until recently when there's not so much else to do. There's this huge craze now with PogChamps, with just with everyone playing online. It's a lot more accessible these days too, with
Yeah,
all
for
like the
sure.
major chess websites. So I don't know if you caught like at least my earlier like maybe my stream from it was like 20-30 minutes ago, but I was watching your I think your initial video kind of describing your
Oh, the
chess
challenge.
challenge.
Ah, yeah, cool.
So yeah, so you're it's 10 weeks, right?
Yep, 10 weeks. Yeah,
And you're kind of midway through.
yeah. I think we've got like 28 days to go, so more than midway through.
Mm,
But we just
okay.
hit like a little downswing. So I was like, yeah, I think I got to I think the highest my peak was like 1420,
Okay.
and then last week, we had a little downswing, and I was feeling pretty burned out. I kind of wanted to talk to you about that actually. Like,
Hmm.
I thought that'd be interesting to talk about, especially for other people who are looking to learn chess, maybe learn chess quick or something. I'm not sure
Sure.
if you want to say it like that.
There's always like, yeah, there's always those people that are trying to accelerate improvement as much as possible.
Exactly, and I'm not too into doing that. I guess it's more just like the way that I like to learn, just it goes in that direction. Like I just learn things quickly because of it. Um,
Hmm.
but it was kind of funny. Like when I started like looking at all of these, I was like, has anyone else done this where they've learned chess fast? And a lot of the
Hmm.
videos I looked at, like I looked at that guy who challenged Magnus Carlsen, um, and like he was like, I've got 30 days to like learn how to beat, oh, get good enough at chess so I can beat Magnus. And I thought that was quite interesting because I think he spent the 30 days and then he tried to like write a computer algorithm or something, and then
I,
memorize everything.
I saw the exact video you're referring to. Yeah, which
Yeah,
which did not work at all. Like you can't really approach chess like that.
yeah, for sure. And I think like from my experience as well, because I've played a lot of other games and got like high rank in other games, chess has been completely different. Like,
Hmm.
it's a completely different experience because usually I'm relying on sort of like mechanical skill building up and like muscle memory and things like that, and a lot of intuition. But with chess, I'm mainly using focus. Like that's the main thing I'm doing, which I wasn't actually used to actually like having to focus that heavily during games. At least I don't think that's what I was doing when I was playing other games. Like I didn't feel like I was like that heavily focused.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm,
Because this is a really important aspect, especially like when you're in the midst of competition,
yeah.
that you're in the best mental form as possible. Because regardless of your ability, if you're in like peak mental form, you're super focused, you're alert every move,
Mm,
you can usually play a few hundred points higher than your actual rating.
yeah.
But if you're not focused or you're sleep deprived, um, or you're not really like paying attention to what your opponent's doing, then you can play much lower than your ability. So it is hard to maintain kind of that peak mental form, but it is very important um, to play when you feel like you're in the best form. And
Mm.
sometimes if you feel burnt out, then sometimes it's better just to take a break and not burn yourself out further.
That's exactly what I was talking about just before we started. Actually, like,
Hmm.
um, I'm not sure. Well, you probably have experienced this as well, but it's like when you've gone through an intense period of learning, and then you start experiencing burnout or fatigue over time, and then you take that break and you come back, and it's almost like all of that understanding just kind of like settles in your mind, and it becomes, I don't know, every time I go through that process and like do some intense learning, come back, I always find that it feels almost like effortless to get higher to a higher place than I was before.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I can relate to this. I've coached students over the years where I've seen the same kind of pattern that even if you have kind of either a downswing or plateau in rating, or you have like a few bad tournaments or a few bad games, and your rating takes a dip, it's not actually your overall level deteriorating.
Mm,
It's more the fact that yeah, like there's still room for improvement, and if especially if you have the right kind of mental approach, kind of the right philosophy, which it seems like you do. It seems like you're very much have like a learning kind of growth mindset,
mm,
where you're more concerned about just improving rather than being purely focused on the results. Then sometimes these downswings or plateaus can be very valuable for further growth if you can effectively kind of investigate what's going wrong and what can be improved.
mm.
So sometimes you do have to embrace it and understand it's part of the learning process.
100%. Like I think as well, like I saw one of your videos with David Peckman,
Oh,
and
sure.
yeah, and yeah, he was even talking about like, and I thought this would be interesting to talk about as well, was talking about him hitting like a plateau. Like I think he'd played
Hmm.
chess for a while, and he couldn't get past like a certain level. And I thought it would be interesting, just hearing your perspective about finding players, or having taught a lot of players, like, um, and maybe having seen them hit plateaus. Like, have you how have you seen people sort of get past that?
Yeah, I actually wrote like a whole article about this. It happened to myself as well when I hit a plateau at a pretty high rating. I plateaued in this was back in 2012
Mm,
was kind of my peak rating. I hit a rating of 2400, um, like US rated,
mm,
and I didn't improve uh, like in terms of rating for about 4 years.
yeah.
Then after those 4 years, I had like a couple really good events where I just gained 100 points within like 2 or 3 tournaments. Um, so I'll let me see if I can find the article and maybe just outline the points.
Okay, yeah, that'd be interesting because I was thinking about this earlier, and I did have some things that I wanted to talk about as well. I think it'd be cool to
Yeah,
see two
if you
perspectives.
Google my name along with overcoming a slump, um, I wrote this article after I had like this really good event, and I can share a
Keys.
link with you in the Zoom chat.
Oh yeah, do that. Yeah, keys to success. Oh.
Yeah. Um, but a lot of it was okay. A lot of it was putting in a lot more time and effort. I mean, a lot of people plateau sometimes when they're not devoting serious time and energy to studying,
Mm,
and in like with a lot of students that I work with, like they'll stay involved with chess, they'll play, but they don't spend enough time actually doing serious study or going out over their games, especially their losses.
mm,
Um, and this is very important. The pattern that I've seen with students, the ones who make the biggest leaps, are the ones who are very proactive about like going over all of their games, of coming up with the right questions, um, even like taking every game that they play and annotating, like basically making comments throughout the game and having very thorough annotations.
mm,
Um, and of course it helps to have like someone like a coach that they can ask questions to, but even if you're just doing it on your own where you're making annotations, you're seeing overall kind of recurring themes and tendencies, this can this can definitely help rather than just focusing on playing your results.
for sure.
um,
Yeah.
so I mean, in this article I outline kind of the more philosophical approach that I took with having like more tournament goals, more study goals,
Mm,
rather
okay.
than just a pure rating goal. Um, and I know you're focused on like getting to 1700 in an X number of weeks, which is completely fine.
Yeah, yeah.
But you'll definitely want to have more kind of detailed goals than just the rating or just like winning
Oh,
X
okay.
amount of games.
What do you mean by that?
Um, so if you see uh the article, I don't know if you have it pulled up,
Yeah, yeah. I've got it. I've got it. Yeah.
but like solving X number of tactics every day, making sure you're very focused with like during gameplay, um, like having more specific study approaches.
Yeah, I just read the last two. So, what is
Yeah,
it? Get naked and grow facial here. Hmm.
yeah.
Okay.
Also, not to distract, but huge shout out to Gotham Chess,
Oh
who
yeah,
just rated
I
with
love Gotham Chess. He's awesome.
yeah with so many people. Sorry, let me just give a shout out.
No worries.
Yeah, like 2,000 people. So
Yeah, like my main approach to this stuff, like I guess I'm a lot more almost like spiritual about this kind of stuff.
mm,
uh where I like to focus on like say if I get stuck at something, I sort of always look at it as more like it's an internal issue,
mm-hmm.
uh rather than something analytical that I can be doing differently. Um
Yeah, I think when it
yeah.
comes to chess, it's important to like not just be analytical, but like having all these different perspectives.
Mm,
Um, I mean, I don't know if I can so much relate to the spiritual perspective. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
yeah.
But I think there's no like clear best approach. It
Mm,
always depends on the individual too. Depends on your learning style.
yeah.
And like usually when people ask how to get better at chess, this is one of the most common questions I get like almost every day, like randomly in the Twitch chat.
Mm,
It really depends on the individual and being self-aware and knowing what works for you, what like what routines work for you, what resources, what your learning style is,
mm.
and then optimizing an approach that is most conducive to your learning style.
100%. And I completely agree with that as well. I think the part that I focus on the most nowadays is mainly like self-awareness. Like, why do
Mhm.
I feel like I'm getting stuck, or why do I feel like I'm struggling? And I'll like go into quite deep analysis into that, and try and figure that out. Um, and my process for that is like kind of, I think, kind of strange. Like, and I guess how I got to there as well was like I used to suffer from like tons of anxiety. Like
Mm,
back when I played Starcraft, I actually like completely burned myself out, and had to take a huge break because of that. And I guess after doing that, I kind of just like um started this. I mean, I mentioned I was really into psychology as well.
mhm.
I just went super deep into that side of things, and kind of figuring out like my psychology, and like how I work, and now that I've sort of come back and I played other games, I've seen myself not get stuck as much as I did before, and be able to apply the same things I learned with dealing with anxiety, into getting better at video games. Um,
Nice.
yeah, which is quite, it was pretty cool. Actually, like, it was, I don't know, it's always really awesome when you see the like correlations between things.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask about like kind of the overlap with your background in StarCraft and like what you've learned from that you can apply to just getting better at chess,
Mm.
or like is there as much overlap as you expected?
Um, there kind of is, like, having the different, like, you definitely have the different build orders and things like that, which are kind of like the openings in chess.
Hmm.
Uh, one of the things that I focus on the most when I was playing StarCraft, though, is especially when I'm learning, and it's almost like what I wanted, what I'm trying to do, and I have been applying when I'm learning chess as well, is that I always look at my first mistake, and then if I can improve that first mistake, then it means that, yeah, I'm one step closer to perfecting my game. Or like in Star, the reason for that is because in StarCraft you have time, right?
Hmm.
Time's a huge factor in StarCraft, and so if you're 1 second behind your opponent and they're doing some sort of a timing attack, then you might lose just because of that 1 second. And so
Mm.
being able to perfect your opener, or finding the first mistake, the first like 1 second or half a second or millisecond or whatever that you lose, if you're able to change that, then you're pushing back that moment, um, before the game becomes unperfect. Yeah, and so the way I saw it, the longer you can push back the moment, for that first imperfection, the more likely you are to win.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll admit I'm very like I guess ignorant or just not knowledgeable about StarCraft,
Oh, that's
but
okay.
I do kind of understand what you're saying, where if you can take one mistake or one lesson from every single game
Mm,
and be able to constantly reflect, then it's going to make you continually better, even if your rating is fluctuating. um, your overall knowledge will keep improving, and
mm.
eventually your rating will catch up to that. So I think that's a very important approach to have, not only in chess but really any field in life.
100%. Like, and I completely, like, I'll go. That's exactly what I try and do as well. It's like I will only really focus on one or two things in an analysis. Like, I'm not as interested in learning sort of everything, and more just like, what are the two main things, or the first mistake and maybe one main concept that I'm not doing right now that I can focus on the next game. Because otherwise you kind of just like cluttering. Well, for me at least, I clutter my learning up, and I can't. I'm not really focusing on drilling like one specific thing. Mm.
And it's easy to, yeah, it's easy to get overwhelmed with like when studying and learning chess, where you play a game and there's I mean there's dozens of lessons to take away, especially when you're first starting out. But
Mm.
it is sometimes important just to kind of take the big ones away and have something that you can like more effectively apply for future games.
Yeah, 100%.
Um, but did you want to like go like dig into at least the games that you sent me?
Yeah, let's do it.
Um, I will. Can you remind me your Lichess username?
It's Delinar Collins for anyone who likes Brandon Sanderson.
Aha. Okay. Give me just a moment. Okay. I'm just gonna copy this. So
I can
I
send it
have
to
an
you as well.
analysis board, which if you check your notifications, you should see
Yeah.
a message from me. Are you familiar with kind of this interface like Lichess Study?
Yeah, I had a look at it last night, and some
Okay.
I've been lucky enough for some people to send me some studies as well.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Mm.
So basically, when it comes to a lesson like this is a shared analysis board where whenever I make a move, it should be synced up on your end.
Mm-hmm.
And if you make a move, it'll show on my end. And if you look on, it should be on your left side, you'll see two chapters.
Yep.
Yeah, so these are the two games you sent me. So whatever analysis we do within these games, it'll be saved. You can always go back and look. We can always add more games to the study as well. So nice way to keep things organized. And like if you wanted to, sometimes what I recommend just for players that are playing a lot online and looking to improve is have kind of a designated study where you
Mm.
keep all kind of the serious games that you play.
Okay,
And then
interesting.
over time you can kind of build up a collection, always go back and review. um, and there's some tools like that. You can do these computer reports with Stockfish. You have access to the opening book.
Mm.
Based on looking at your games, it seems like you've definitely focused more on um, more areas other than the opening,
Mm. Yeah.
which is probably a good way to start. I don't know if that was like a conscious decision on your part,
A lot of people
but
were like, like they were like, do not spend time on the openings. Yeah, and I was
uh-huh.
like, okay,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, it does help to have like at least a basic repertoire to get you going early
Mm.
and to avoid like getting bad positions from early on. And it
Mm.
is sometimes like an easy way to um, at least to avoid, especially like the games that you played, these two games, like you ran into trouble very early.
Mm.
And if you worked on even like a basic opening repertoire, that could, I think, make a big difference in your games.
Okay, awesome.
But it is important, like for especially for newer players, not to dig into openings like so early.
Yeah.
Even though it's probably one of the easier things to learn in chess because it's more about memorizing.
Mm.
I think it is better to learn principles when first beginning.
Yeah. Okay.
So I see we can start with this game against Conman 23. We're black,
Okay.
and you play Sicilian.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is like have you studied this opening at all? Is there like specific variation you know?
So I usually play what is it? D3 D6.
Mm-hmm.
Um if they go knight F3.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's pretty much like I don't know why I do this. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of like I'm not I don't know why I do a lot of things until the mid game
Oh,
in
interesting. Okay.
chess. Yeah, and then even in the mid game, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
um I find that I'm winning a lot of games in the end game
Mm-hmm.
because I it's kind of funny, but pretty much every game or a lot of games that I play, they get to the end game, like I have no time and they've got like 10 minutes left, and
Oh.
it's just me like making fast moves, and I find I oftentimes win in those situations.
Oh wow.
Um, when I'm just like playing when it's like a few pieces and I can play by instinct and do the fast moves, but it's all of the stuff before that where I just like I have no idea like why I do things. Like sometimes it's clear. Like oh
Okay.
here's like a nice spot I could put my knight, or here's like a piece that looks weak. But a lot of the time, I just have no idea what to do next.
Interesting.
Mm.
Because I mean, based on at least based on the games I saw, that like you're still playing like solid moves. You're not playing like completely random moves with no purpose. Okay, maybe there's a few moments where that's the
Mm.
case. Um, but so in the opening, I, I assume you understand at least general principles, like developing the pieces, controlling the center, getting
Yep.
your king safe. Um, if you are to learn any sort of opening and commit it to memory,
Mm.
it's very important to like understand the purpose behind each move.
Yeah.
Even like the very like early moves, like even we can start with move one c5, um, where you're fighting for the center, and very often your knight comes behind the c pawn to help more effectively control the d4 square.
Mm-hmm.
D6, of course, you create the open diagonal for your bishop. It's a very typical move to prepare knight f6 and discourage white from playing e5.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and maybe you played this move like just seeing like games of strong players. This is actually like one of the most common opening variations.
Mm.
At the start of either we can as black, you can either go into a Sicilian Night Orf or Sicilian Dragon. The names aren't too important, but there's different ways of kind of continuing development
Mm.
as black. Um, so let's see how the game continued, and we'll definitely want to address maybe some of the moments in the middle game. But I do want to like ensure you're understanding kind of the purpose not only of your moves but also your opponent's moves.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely understand the taking the center or controlling the center bit.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding most of the time it's better to develop your knights first and keep your king safe and things like that. Like I've run into so many games where my king's just been sitting there and they just lose
Mm.
because of it. Um,
Yeah, actually, game two was a good example of that.
yeah. Well, it's like I'll get
Yeah.
distracted and I'll be like, that's something that I find myself doing a lot. Maybe it's more towards my playstyle. Is that when I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I can push an advantage, I will just go for it and forget about everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at the moment, I almost feel like I want to build an intuition for that, like knowing when to attack,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm okay with losing some games while I learn that. But yeah, a lot of the time I am running into just my king is not safe.
Interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, and like there's general principles to abide by. Like of course, like there's a basic principles like control the center, develop your pieces and castle. Um, but I think one of the reasons why you might be running into problems with king safety early on is you're not being so efficient with development.
Okay.
And we'll see that more in game two. Like this game, you managed to castle moderately early. It was also a matter of like understanding what white wants to do, because
Mm.
when white plays c3, and this is also more typical when you're black, because you're moving second. Sometimes white will be aggressive, put you on the defense. When white plays c3, white just wants to take over the center with this move pawn d4.
Yeah, there's. I remember
Um,
thinking that in game as well. He
mhm.
he just wants to take the seat. I remember thinking that, but I don't know what I
Okay.
did to stop it. I think I was just like, my pawn on
So, well,
c3
you
is good
played a
enough.
natural developing move, but you didn't
Mm.
really stop it.
Oh, okay.
And in some way, like after white plays d4, um, yeah, you're trying to pressure the square, but white has enough defenders, and then there's this constant worry of white kicking your knight.
Mm.
Um, so it's still completely fine for you, but it's already like slightly uncomfortable.
Interesting. Yeah, because so from my perspective, I remember thinking me moving my knight to what c6 is
C6,
me.
right?
Yeah, is me contesting that square because I was like my
Mm.
knight attacks that square, but I guess it doesn't.
Yeah,
Right.
there were enough supporters. Like
Mm.
sometimes if you're thinking about this, and then imagining white plays d4, you can count one, two, three defenders. You only have two attackers.
Mm.
So just not enough to actually prevent d4.
Yeah. So would it be better for me to play like e5 or something like that?
So I'll say the best move and the most common move here is knight f6.
Okay.
And there's a few reasons why I'd recommend this over knight c6. First of all, you're trying to accelerate your kingside development,
Mm-hmm.
because you know at some point you want a kingside castle. It's very rare, especially if you're moving your c pawn early, that you're ever going to want a castle queenside.
Mm-hmm.
So playing knight f6 and then going for a plan of either g6 bishop g7 or e6 bishop e7, it'll lead to your king getting safer more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, you're also attacking this pawn.
Okay.
So if white plays d4, you can just take the pawn, free pawn.
True.
Um,
Mm.
so this is kind of a more like there's more reasons to play knight f6 over knight c6.
Mm.
And
Okay.
I know like if no one has explained this position to you, it might not be so obvious
Mm.
when deciding between these two knight moves. Um, but in general, and you'll see this across most openings, it's more typical to develop your king side earlier than your queen side.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
I have tried that. I have noticed that as a trend as well. But
mhm.
I guess in games it's a for me it's a little bit different when I try to execute it. I'm like, "Oh, I want to do these ideas," or like something changes it a lot. Um
Yeah, of course you always have to react to what your opponent's doing, because
mm,
sometimes they'll try and mess with your plans, or they'll set up traps. And speaking of traps, like okay, so white can play a very kind of nifty move here.
mm,
Let's imagine white plays bishop e2.
yep.
And I don't want to give you like so many clues, because I'm curious like
No, I know
what your thought
exactly.
process would be.
I've seen this before. Like
Oh, okay.
if I take the pawn, he checks with the queen and takes
Yeah.
my knight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have
This was
to be careful of
devastating.
this sort of opening trap. Yeah.
Yeah, this was devastating when it happened
Um,
to me. I was very sad.
it seems like you've already suffered the pain, and you've learned your lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a typical opening trap. Um, but yeah, going forward from here, you can't quite take the pawn, but you can play this move. And we should note that if white plays d4, then there's no more queen a4 resource.
Mm,
So d4 allows you to win the pawn.
true, true.
Um, and meanwhile, if white doesn't play d4, maybe castles, you still can't take the pawn, but you can play bishop g7. And here you'd be castling as quickly as possible.
Mm,
Now, earlier you had mentioned the possibility of e5,
yeah,
which it's similar to knight c6 actually, because you are attempting to control the square, but white can
true.
still play d4. And this is actually a nice situation for white, because you're completely undeveloped with your pieces. You've only moved pawns so far.
Mm,
White's a bit ahead in development, has a bit better center control, and if the center opens up, then there's more danger for you to run into issues, especially with your king
yeah.
being on e8.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm kind of thinking about like almost the thought process that I should be having, or maybe a better thought process than I have at the moment, where it's more instead of preparing everything for one square, where I'm like, oh, this square is gonna be, where all the action's happening, so I better prepare my pieces here. I think I should be checking more because maybe I'm playing that a bit on autopilot, where I'm like, I can just set this up and then, as long as I'm focusing here, then he won't be able to attack it. Which for me, it's kind of a weird thought process to have, but I think that is what's happening at the moment. And I'm not doing these checks of like, oh, he's got three attackers,
Mm.
and I've only got two attackers. He's got three defenders, and I'm sort of just assuming at the start that I'll be all right. Just maybe because it's only a couple of moves in.
Yeah. I mean, it is important to sometimes like identify key squares and
Mm,
figure out like if you can effectively fight for them. Sometimes you just can't, like you can't fully um, fight for a square that you want to. Like d4, white's going to be controlling, so sometimes you just have to deal with it, play around with it.
mm.
Um, and if you're ever unsure, like you have to sometimes just count the number of attackers and defenders.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, going forward here, you okay, you play knight c6, and it's still completely playable. Here you play e6, which it's kind of a passive move. I mean, I assume maybe I can ask you what your thought process was with this move. Were you scared of
Um.
d5?
Well, I really don't like fianchettoing.
Ah, okay, interesting.
I have for some reason I just don't know how to play with like whenever I play with
Huh.
fianchetto bishops, it just doesn't work out for me for some reason. And so my my reluctance to fianchetto at the moment is what's causing me to play e6. And because I know that if I don't fianchetto, then I have to get my uh, bishop onto e7
Hmm.
in order to continue development. And I'm also stopping. I know that it's a common theme in the Sicilian to play e6 to stop the attack from the light squared bishop and the queen.
Oh, if the bishop ever comes here,
Yeah.
sure.
Um, and so I just like, I might as well just do it now. I think it also blocks the
Mm.
pawn push to attack the knight as well.
You are, yeah, you're kind of discouraging this d5 move.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, the first thing to address is I'm wondering if you had like a traumatic experience maybe in your childhood where you fianchettoed and you got punished for it, and then now you associate fianchettoing
I must
with
have.
just getting crushed. But it's not inherently a bad strategy, and sometimes you just have to react to the position you're given.
Mm.
And here it's one of the safest setups for your king,
Yeah,
and it's a
100%.
setup where you're not blocking this bishop on c8.
Mm.
You're preserving the idea of bishop g4.
True, because that's one of my main problems. Is that I mean I think I mentioned it to you. Like I'm not getting my light square bishop is always stuck. For what seems like
Mm-hmm.
pretty much any game that I play black, I have no light square bishop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I will say that like you had the opportunity here to develop your bishop to g4,
Mm.
where like I feel like this would be one of the most appealing looking moves before playing e6, because you're activating your bishop, you're pinning the knight, and
Mm-hmm.
pinning the knight you're applying more pressure to this pawn. um, but I will say I think it was probably a good thing you didn't play bishop g4, because there's a very nasty trap that white can play
Oh
in this
really?
position to try and exploit your bishop, and it's not the most intuitive. I think I'll go ahead and show you the first move,
Okay.
um, because white can play d5 here,
Okay.
so attacking your knight. And now, what's the most obvious looking square for your knight?
Um, I mean I don't usually go backwards, despite what
Mm-hmm.
the analysis is saying. I
Mm.
would probably
Oh,
yeah
do you have the engine turned on?
yeah I do. Should I turn it off?
Ah, okay. I would recommend turning it off, because
Okay.
it'll spoil kind of the surprise of
Okay.
what's about to happen.
It would probably be yeah, probably the e5.
Yeah,
Or,
this looks like the most natural because the knight's pinned,
mm,
and you're putting your knight in the center. Um, if you had the engine turned on, it would spit out a brilliant move for white
mm,
in this position. So I'll have you try and find it.
okay.
People in the chat can try and find it too, but white to move and punish black.
Well, knight takes definitely opens up the queen. Or is that what I want? Let me see.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, this is purely tactical.
hmm. Oh, I mean, wait. I'm just looking at the bishop now. If I check with the bishop, what do I even block with? Uh, wait, is that even just check? I have to block with the knight, right? Um,
Yeah, so the knight could retreat, maybe the bishop could retreat, so
true.
there'd be a few options.
I can't see it at the moment.
But you're along the right lines this is definitely a resource for white
Mm,
to exploit the king, especially with this open diagonal. Um, and it's interesting, like you kind of have the right idea, but it's just a matter of executing it in the right way. And
okay. Take
like
that.
you're clearly it's not a matter of a blind spot, because you've mentioned the relevant moves. It's just about making them work in the right sequence.
Okay. Um. Oh. Ah. So wait. Can I take? Can my knight take? Oh, sorry. White's knight takes my knight, and then if he takes with the bishop, now that's if he moves in with his bishop, is that checkmate? Um.
Not quite checkmate, but it's very good. Like,
That's very
okay,
good.
so let's imagine. So knight takes knight, bishop takes queen. You're looking at bishop b5 check. Black
Hmm.
has one legal move there.
Oh, we win the queen though.
Yeah, queen d7. You win the queen. You keep checking,
Hmm.
and you're gonna wind up material.
Yeah, and then we can take the his bishop as well.
Right. So like spotting this and being able to see ahead is it's important kind of skill set to have. But it's a pretty beautiful line because you
Hmm.
do give away your queen.
That's really cool.
It is temporary, but it's a nice idea.
Hmm.
And then black is forced. If we see this play out, king d8. White white has a few moves here. Maybe the simplest is just king takes bishop.
Hmm.
If white loses a knight, then we move back the bishop and white's up a piece. A very
Awesome.
healthy position. Um, so it was probably a good thing you didn't play bishop g4 because there was potential just to fall for that and get crushed.
Interesting.
Um, and actually, so if there's a database on Lichess.
Hmm.
If you see the button like below the notation panel, a little book icon,
Yeah.
you can see that in this position, close to 2,200 people played knight e5,
Wow.
and then 914 people found the winning move for white is knight takes e5. So it's actually a typical opening trap.
That's really cool.
Yeah, but definitely a good thing to avoid if you're playing the black side. So e6 actually e6 was kind of a safe move.
Hmm.
Um, and not a bad decision. I mean, I'd still be more inclined to go for the fianchetto. Um, but let's see what happens. So I think you're like the more key mistake came later in the game.
Hmm.
So bishop e5, pinning your knight, maybe threatening this move, this pawn push. I think you were aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you played bishop d7. Another possible move here, you can play a6.
Hmm.
This is very common. Like whenever the bishop comes here to pin a knight, this is always a move you should consider.
Yeah.
In this case, I might even prefer it over bishop d7 because you're gaining time against the bishop. If the bishop takes your knight, you take back, you strengthen your center, which is nice. You also get the bishop pair, which is usually a bit more valuable than a bishop knight pair.
Hmm.
And if white were to move back and maintain the pin, then you could just advance again. Um, and this might go back to your fear of fianchettoing, but it would be very nice if you can get your bishop to b7.
True. Yeah.
This is a much more energetic square than d7.
Yeah.
Because on b7, you're focused on the center, like towards white's king side. This is definitely a target that currently it has no defenders. A very common idea for black is to continue applying pressure to the e4 pawn.
Hmm. Yeah. It's very rare that I see my opponents go back when I play
Mm.
uh what is
So
it,
they
a6.
more often like to trade.
Yeah, they like to trade.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is I mean it's playable, but now you have one more pawn closer to the center,
Hmm.
um, and you can still go for development. Maybe still go for the fianchetto, like play this and eventually c5,
Hmm.
or sometimes you'll go for a5 and put your bishop on a6. So there'd be a few possible approaches to just completing development and being solid.
Hmm.
But bishop d7, like it's still playable. Like so far, you haven't made any blunders. It's just been more kind of small improvements that you could have made.
Okay.
But white's position so far, white's playing kind of like a grandmaster,
Hmm.
where like all the moves are kind of coming naturally, and it hasn't taken anything special for white to play the best moves.
Hmm.
So knight f6, bishop g5. You get this kind of very symmetrical position. Um, like the symmetry is weirdly pleasing here.
Hmm.
White doing the same strategy on both sides. And if we were to evaluate this, like white is slightly better,
Hmm.
just with a bit more central control, a bit more activity, but you're still solid.
Yeah,
You play a6 here.
I think this setup in particular, like, because I use chess tempo for like plugging in opening data.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and but I think that I'm doing it the wrong way because I think the opening data I'm getting is from the like engines, like engines being like, oh, you should do
Ah,
this because I think the engine really likes this setup where it's like you're when you've started with the Sicilian, it likes you defending your knights with your bishops, um,
mhm.
rather than playing like it prefers that playing overplaying a6, but I'm not. I don't know why.
Mhm.
And so I almost feel like yeah, maybe I'm approaching it the wrong way by using the engine's analysis there.
Yeah, there's definitely like the engines will still like recommend good moves, but sometimes it'll just spit out moves without giving a clear explanation.
Mm,
And there's times where even the best move is not the most intuitive or easy to play move.
yeah. Okay.
And it's sometimes better to have more like cohesive plans, um, which is why sometimes it can be more effective. Like if you're trying to learn a certain opening rather than just following the engine, you make an effort to find strong players who are playing the openings that you want to learn, and then
Mm,
investigate what they're doing, like where they're putting their pieces, what their plans are beyond the opening and into the middle game.
yeah.
And
I
you
really
can
like
learn
that.
a lot by
Mm.
just finding the games of strong players and the openings that you're trying to learn.
Okay. Yeah, I think I really like that idea. I think I'm gonna go back to that. I think I might have mentioned that in my video actually, like finding a certain
Mm,
style, but I kind of went away from that from I guess mainly just advice from other people, um, just being like, oh, you shouldn't need to do that at the start. I guess.
hmm
This experience for me has been really interesting because I've kind of made it like a public thing, which I've never really done before, and
which
so
is really it's a very great concept because yeah, people can constantly give you feedback.
yeah, but in a way, it's changed the way how I approach things. Uh, like the how I would normally approach something is now I'm getting all these different influences, and so
Mm,
I'm trying to consider more things than what I was previously.
gotcha.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's not a rare occurrence that you'll get conflicting opinions.
Yeah,
This can
exactly.
happen a lot if you're, especially if you're working with multiple coaches. But sometimes you can pick and choose like what works best for you as well, what you're seeing the most progress with.
Mm.
If you did want to like find games from a specific player, because in general, like studying games with strong players, that can be a great way to just improve your overall chess.
Yeah.
You can kind of go into the opening book. Um, there's a way to like toggle the master's database.
Oh yeah, I just
Um,
found that before. Yeah.
yeah, and in this position, you're already like out of any sort of opening theory.
Mm.
But even like if you wanted to learn the opening a bit more thoroughly after like the recommended move knight f6,
Mm.
there's a lot of like high level games you can find.
Okay.
But okay, we can go back to this key position because you're still very much in the game, like a little bit passive,
Mm.
and the engine might recommend a setup like this, but it is a bit difficult to play after you castle. The big question is what next,
Mm.
because you're very very cramped with space. But you did play h6. Okay, this is fine to kick the bishop. Now you castle, so symmetry kind of maintains itself. And now bishop c2. Okay, that's a fair move from white. I feel like in this position, maybe you weren't entirely sure what to do.
Yeah, so I get this into these positions quite often where
Mm,
like I'm kind of like now what do I do? Like I kind of know that I probably want to be developing my queen, connecting my rooks,
sure.
but like I'm not sure how to break out of this. Like which pawn do I push? Well, which am I going for a pawn break or am I going for some other thing? Like especially if the my opponent I can't see any clear weaknesses.
Right. White's like everything in White's position is well defended.
Hmm.
Though actually, so you played Queen B6 going after the only thing that's undefended.
Hmm.
Um, the issue was that um, it wasn't entirely clear what to do after that. There is some like tactics involved with what you played in the game.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, in general, if you're not sure what to do, sometimes you just want to make small improvements. and fight for space or try and optimize your worst place pieces.
Mm-hmm.
You do make a good point. Like your rooks and your queen are probably the pieces that can use the most improvement. Um, but also, it is a good idea to consider like the options for your pawns.
Yeah.
Now, like especially with the structure, you should always be considering what will happen if you try and break in the center
Mm.
with either your E or D pawn. Unfortunately, if you push either pawn, like let's say you play E5, white's going to hit you with D5 and just gain more space.
Mm.
And same thing if you play this, and white's going to play this, and your knight gets kicked, and you're going to have to retreat. So for right now, you don't really want to push either center pawn.
Mm.
The move that looks most attractive to me, and maybe it's at first maybe there's not such a clear purpose, but it does. It's kind of like just a slower improving move is to play b5,
Mm. Okay.
where you're not making any like serious commitment. You're just trying to control more territory on the queen side, and you have looming ideas of playing b4, perhaps at the right moment to kick away the knight. So you're just giving yourself an additional resource, kind of entering the middle game.
Okay.
Um, and like from at least from my kind of intuitive standpoint, it feels much better to play b5 and then queen b6, where your pawn is kind of leading the way, your queen
Mm.
is behind the pawn, your queen can then apply pressure to the b file. Another move to include at some point is also rook c8.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that. That's
um,
good.
and yeah, I'll give you kind of a general rule too in the middle game. If you're not sure what to do with your rooks, you either want to look for the open files, the
Mm-hmm.
files that have no pawns on them, or files which might potentially open in the future. A file where there might be a trade of pawns where the rook can then later activate.
Yeah.
So right now, all the files are closed except for the C file.
Mm.
Even though there's minor pieces on the C file, it's more about the pawns, or the absence of pawns in this case. So rook c8 would be another fine move here, where later on, if your knight ever moves, your rook has more scope.
Interesting.
And then just to give you just one like additional plan where you can kind of combine these moves is, let's say you start with b5.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned this idea, but if you combine that with rook c8, you can perhaps later go for knight a5 and then knight c4.
Mm.
And this is one square in white's territory that you're controlling. Like even though you have less space in the center, it's a potential square that would be very good for a knight. Where you target b2, you control a lot more squares in white's position.
Yeah. So something that I'm thinking about now as well is that I maybe a common occurrence when I'm unsure what to do is I will target these like his pawns, the what is it, the B2 pawn or something like that, or something similar. But even though it's very easily defended, he can just push it up one square or whatever, and now it's easily defended, and now my queen's blocking my pawn, and I think this is quite a common thing that I do when I'm just unsure what to do. I'm actually improving my opponent's position by moving my queen here, and also unimproving my own position because I'm blocking off, I'm blocking off this pawn push.
This is very common, like across a lot of amateur players. They'll play like a simple attacking move
Mm,
that won't benefit their position long term, and they'll
yeah,
just play like a simple threat. So it's okay to like attack your opponent, but you want to do so in a manner that's still kind of improving your position and keeping harmony.
yeah. I almost feel like it's almost like I hope he doesn't see this, like it's sort of thing.
Uh,
Even though it's so obvious, But like this almost what it feels like. I'm clutching it. I'm clutching at straws in these positions where I'm just like, hopefully he screws up in some way, and then I get some advantage because I just have no idea how I'm meant to change things or like get an advantage myself without him screwing up.
yeah.
Yeah,
So what you're kind of referring to is probably like a material advantage, where
yeah,
it's a point when material your opponent blunders or you have some tactic.
exactly.
That's
Yeah.
It's probably the most common type of advantage in chess. which it's very tangible. Like you can just count material and then see who's better.
Mm.
But then there's a lot of other advantages, like types of advantages in chess, which are not as tangible as material. Like in this position, oops, did not mean to do that, but um, yeah, like in this position, material's equal,
Mm.
but white has a small advantage with just more space, more central control.
Yeah.
Um, Also, slightly better piece activity. So sometimes, if you're trying to um, build up your position or fight for advantages, you're not necessarily trying to win material. You're just trying to fight for space, fight for center control, fighting for control over key squares, which would be one reason to go for this. This is a key square that you can try and exploit.
Yeah.
Um, another very common advantage is just like superior pieces.
Mm.
In this case, white's pieces are a little bit superior because your bishops are just they're sad, kind of
Yeah.
hibernating,
Very sad. Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. So, which like it's kind of it's not necessarily a long term issue because at some point the position will open up. Your bishops can hopefully find better squares.
Mm.
Um, but it's something short term which might make the position a bit more pleasant for the opponent.
Yeah, I think I almost had like a revelation just now. It's like, because
Mm-hmm.
basically what I've done here is I've kind of like, um, I've just been really inefficient with my development, right? Because what I'm saying is, okay, I'm going to defend now and like be this like turtle, and then but later on I want to go out and put my pieces in good positions. But I'm almost like I'm putting myself behind in just the ways that I'm doing things in the opening at the moment. Whereas I could just be finding efficient positions at the start to put my pieces. Uh, like what you were saying before about like pushing the a the pawn to a6 when the bishop comes in. It does allow me to open up the space a bit more, which I'm gonna want to be doing this later on anyway. um because now if I'm pushing b5, I can bring my bishop back to b7,
Yeah,
which
if
is
your bishop could get to b7, it's just a
exactly.
much happier square. Yeah.
But it's just going to take me ages to get there now. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really cool. I mean, that gives me a lot of ideas about like how I can go back into and maybe do some study in my openings and be like, where would I like my pieces to be after the everything's moved initially? Um,
For sure.
yeah.
And it's a very good sign too that you're maybe entering this phase where at least the mistakes you're making they're not clear blunders, or you're not like, at least
Mm.
so far this game you haven't blundered any material, but they're more kind of abstract concepts which if you can start working on that can definitely lead to further improvement.
Yeah,
um,
I guess I wanted to ask you as well, like how much of when you're playing is you purely calculating compared to like you almost like intuitively feeling that this position's good. Um,
mhm.
I'm guessing you're doing the calculations anyway, or like at least a small amount of them, and then being like, oh, this position's good because I got this. Yeah, my bishop's on the diagonal, or
Yeah, that's actually that's an interesting question. I think I don't want to give a disappointing answer, but the general answer is it depends.
yeah,
It really depends on the situation. A position like this, there's very little calculation involved. Like I won't be thinking any variation more than two or three moves ahead.
interesting.
Because if I play a move like b5, white's going to have a bunch of different options.
Yeah,
And it doesn't make sense to calculate like all the different branches concretely. It's more about understanding kind of the plans, like the plans for myself, but maybe the plans for white. Like maybe white's going for improvement of their own like rooks and queen, maybe rook e1,
mm.
maybe queen d3. So I'd be aware of kind of the general ideas for each side in a position like this. Other positions, though, which are more tactical, then concrete calculation is very important.
Mm.
And then sometimes visualization is very relevant too, where you have to think several moves ahead to see who's actually like coming out on top in a complicated variation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like I know I personally struggle a lot at the moment with puzzles where, um, if I'm not sure what my opponent can do, like even though I'm in a very
Mm,
clearly winning position after making a move, if I can't see like what my opponent's gonna do in order to defend it, like if there's a whole bunch of bad spots for them to put their pieces, it's very hard for me to like visualize what's gonna happen next because I can't see
mm.
where that piece is actually gonna move to.
Well, sometimes if you're not sure what your opponent's going to do, you don't want to spend all your time trying to
Yeah.
search for a move for your opponent. You just want to play the move and let them suffer, let them figure
Mm,
it out for themselves. Of course, it is important to like be aware of your opponent's resources. But a common mistake I see is people spend um, people will see like an attacking move and then spend like several minutes searching for a move for their opponent when they should just play the move right away,
mm.
especially in the quicker game.
Okay.
But we can go forward here
Yeah,
because
let's have a
I
look.
mean, yeah. So like the mistakes you've made so far, they're a bit more like positional, a bit more abstract. The mistake that actually determined the game um, was purely just kind of a blunder.
Mm,
Um, so this was interesting, a3, because white did allow you to take the pawn,
mm,
and this is where like if I had this position, I would very much start calculating and imagine if white takes the pawn, or if I take the pawn, what does white do?
mm.
Um, and it is kind of risky because you're putting the queen in white's territory. Um, and if we try and calculate this out, it is important to note you're attacking the knight
Mm.
on c3. So a move like rook b1 doesn't work because then you win the knight.
Yeah.
But then you have to ask yourself, okay, queen takes b2. What if white just plays queen d3,
Mm.
defending the knight? Do you really want your queen on b2 where the other rook can come in, maybe trap your queen? There's also e5 ideas. Um, so I don't know if you thought about the position this deeply, but I think you made the right decision not taking the pawn
Yeah.
because there is a lot of risk involved.
I think I did think about what would happen if I took it.
Mhm.
I think when after I did do it, I was like, I think I came back or something, or maybe I revisited it, the calculation. I was like, oh wait a minute, I could have just taken the knight. Like this kind of happens to
Mm.
me a bit as well, as where I'll miss some part of the calculation, and then I'll be like, oh, should I have done that? I'm not sure, but I think in this one I was like, I hope I didn't go there, but but it was more like I was thinking, uh that yeah, the rook can very easily just kick me out, and then I don't really have anywhere to go with my
Uh,
queen.
yeah, so like rook b1 is not a reason to reject this line because you take the knight.
Yeah,
Um,
which is I think remembering. I think I remember this, and I forgot about the knight. In this
mhm.
case, like I just saw the rook going there, and then me I think it. I can't remember exactly, but something bad happened to my queen if I did that. Is what I
Yeah,
got from it.
yeah. So like actually in this position, there's two reasons why, like there are two ways white can try and exploit you.
Hmm.
This move, I'm realizing this move is actually very venomous because
Hmm.
rook fb1 is a queen trap. And
Interesting.
then if your queen moves back, like the only way to really save your queen is to retreat all the way.
Hmm.
Then e5 happens and the bishop queen battery is unleashed.
Ooh.
If your knight moves, you get mated.
Yeah.
If you take, I think you're just losing material here. Like there's too
Probably.
many issues. Um,
This
Another
seems.
line,
Oh yeah.
yeah, just to finish, another line was knight a4, which attacks your queen and
Hmm.
prevents you from moving back.
Oh wow.
You'd have to play queen b5 here, which is a really awkward square for your queen.
Hmm.
Um, so like if I were black, I'd kind of sense a danger
Hmm.
and just not even spend so much time trying to do all the calculations.
Okay.
Which maybe goes back to another reason why queen b6 was a slight mistake because you weren't really actually threatening to take this pawn.
No. Yeah. You're totally right. Yeah.
But okay, you made a better decision here, not taking the pawn. You played rook d8,
Mm-hmm.
which it's a central square for the rook. I still would recommend rook c8
Yeah.
because it's open file. So definitely keep this in mind for the future.
Okay.
It's possible that your other rook should come to d8.
Yeah, I'm thinking that now as
Um,
well. I think I was just purely focused on pushing the center here, and I'm aligning my rook with their queen if I did all the takes stuff. Um,
Gotcha. Yeah, which is actually like this is a very common principle sometimes. Like
Mm.
you do want to align your rook with either their king or queen, because then there's tactical potential later.
Yeah. So this is like the key moment actually where I sort of had already made the decision to push, even
Mm.
though because I was kind of like feeling like I needed to break out. Like if I couldn't, I just don't know what to do here. I'm just like, what the hell do I, what am I meant to do here? It's
It is,
yeah.
yeah. Well, it is difficult because you're short on space.
Mm.
All the minor pieces are still on the board too, so like your pieces are kind of in the way of each other.
Mm.
You played the move that I would play, I think, and it was actually like I don't know if you had exactly the right thought process, but if you're not sure what to play, sometimes the first thing you should ask yourself is what the opponent wants to do.
Mm.
And White wants to play e5 here. It's the same idea we just saw
Yep.
of getting the queen to h7. So you played e5 yourself, which is kind of a nice way to stop the threat.
Mm-hmm.
And you set this up kind of nicely where if white does take, then you can take back with pawn. The file is unleashed. Um, Unfortunately, there are some drawbacks with playing this move. White played d5,
Mm.
and this gains more space. Your knight's attacked on c6, and then the game started to get a bit messy because you went into d4.
Yep.
I actually respect this move. This is probably still fine because you have enough support.
Mm.
There's some risk if white takes, your pawn could get a little bit weak, but that might actually work out very well in your favor.
Mm.
White did take here. So this is an interesting moment. I reviewed this game briefly, like earlier,
Mm.
but I wasn't aware of a possibility you have in this moment because you
Mm.
took with the queen,
Yep.
which I think is completely fine, but you can also take with a pawn.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a tactical idea to acknowledge here is that this queen and rook are aligned, and you have the
True.
possibility of eventually bishop b5.
Ooh, yeah.
So, okay, depending what white does, like if white just moves all the way back, which is just a bad move,
Mm.
then you have this and you win material. If white moves to e2, which is probably more realistic, you still have bishop b5, and all of a sudden you're the one kind of counterpunching. You're
Mm.
getting initiative, and the tactics could very well work in your favor. Because now if white takes your pawn, how can you win material here?
Um, I mean, I can take the knight.
Right, because your queen's attacked.
Oh, my queen's attacked. Oops, I didn't even see that.
Oh, did you say? I thought you said you can't take the knight.
No, no, no. Okay, so if in this position, um, I'm just looking at all of the undefended pieces at the moment because he's got a lot of undefended pieces. If I take, yeah, so if I take the queen, the only piece he's got to take back is the knight, and then I can take the rook with my
Exactly. Yeah.
bishop.
Yeah. Just exploiting the fact the knight was a bit pinned
Mm.
to the rook. So yeah, white could have been in trouble here, and this position would have been very likely to happen if you were to take with pawn.
Mm.
Um, and if white were like is not to take the pawn on d4, then has to retreat. Um, and your pieces are coming to life. Like if we imagine queen d2, there's even more tactical potential, and we could probably spend some time just acknowledging like all the tactics here.
Mm.
I'll go ahead and say there's probably at least one or two ways for you to win a pawn. Um, and if we
Okay.
just make the observations, like the knight is pinned to the rook,
Mm.
the queen is tied down to the knight, the bishop on h4 is undefended. There's some targets in the center.
Mm.
So there might be a lot of things to consider here. I'll go ahead and say I think you can win a pawn with either knight takes e4 or knight takes d5.
Okay. Knight takes d5 even.
Just because you're unleashing
Yeah.
the bishop against white's undefended bishop.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah, I see it now.
Yeah, you might be surprised that this could even work, but the
No, I see
point
the
is your knight
boomerang,
is
right?
defending your bishop.
Yeah, yeah. That's cool.
This is a common tactical pattern. Maybe you've seen it
Yeah,
in
yeah.
puzzles before.
What do they call it? I call it the boomerang, but
Oh, I've I'm not familiar that this has a name, but
okay,
a boomerang is nice because your knight
boomerang.
goes out, then it can come back.
Yeah.
So that's a fitting term. Um, and if this were to happen, white still can't take this pawn because of the issues
Mm,
with the bishop.
that's cool.
And then this is similar where you unleash the bishop. In this case, you hit the queen.
Mm,
So if white takes, then you take this way.
interesting.
So um, yeah, so this is a moment where like calculation was important, like realizing the potential where when you get the pawn here, you attack the knight and you kind of keep throwing punches.
Yeah,
You like every move is on a threat with knight e2, bishop e5, and then eventually tactics work out in your favor.
that's really interesting. So I definitely know that like if my pawn was already there, then I probably would be calculating for tactics. But because it wasn't there, like I struggle with the part before, like seeing the tactic, one step before this one, like when the pawn's like
Gotcha.
there. Yeah. Um, like I
Yeah,
think
so
yeah,
yeah,
like
go ahead.
I think my main thought process is, oh, if I move my pawn here, he's just going to move his knight back because
Mm,
because by taking with the pawn, I would have thought about this, I'm sure, but then I would have been like, oh, he just moves his knight back, and then now I have
you
to,
stop your calculation.
yeah, and then I'm like, oh, now my queen has to sit here defending a pawn, and I don't really think about what happens next, but
Hmm.
because yeah, it just stops it. Um,
Yeah, it's a common mistake for a lot of players is
mm,
they'll consider a move and then they won't look a little bit deeper.
yeah,
And if you're playing a move that has a threat and your opponent has to do some response, then you should make an effort to go deeper, assuming you have enough time to calculate. It's
that's
the concept of initiative in chess.
Yeah, that's really cool. Actually, I never thought about it like that. But it's almost like if you
Mhm.
can make them, if you can force a move. That's how I say it in puzzles. Like it's like if you can force a move, then
Exactly.
it's usually gonna turn out well. It's easier for you to calculate at least. Yeah.
Right. And like here, it's not like this isn't so like you're not forcing one specific move because the knight has a bunch of options, like
Mm.
even knight a4. But there's still you can still kind of generalize your own ideas. Like after wherever the knight moves, you're going to have potential for further attacks.
Yeah.
So if we see what happens, you play queen takes d4, still respectable. King h1, and then so this is another moment. So it's another moment where you have this boomerang tactic.
Okay.
I'm gonna start using that term now.
Yeah.
Of knight takes d5.
Mm.
Um, I know it looks weird because white has like two pieces, even three if you include the X-ray with the queen.
Mm.
Um, but the whole point is the bishop is hanging.
Mm.
So if whatever white takes back with on d5, you win the bishop, and if white takes this way, you take this way.
100%.
So I actually want to quiz you on one variation here.
Okay.
Let's say white takes with a pawn.
Yep.
What do you do as black?
Oh, this is gonna be a trick here, isn't it? Okay.
There's some trick involved. Yeah, we'll see how good your board vision is.
Mm. I mean, I can take with the queen. His bishop with the queen. Um. So I want to do that though. I mean, he's now threatening checkmate.
Okay, so this is very important to realize. Yeah, so
Mm,
you have to be aware of white's attack
yeah. Um. So what do I do?
and keep in mind you just lost a piece too.
Yeah. Mm, do I just take the queen first? Yeah, I just take the queen
Yeah,
first.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you trade queens and then the bishop is still hanging and
Mm,
you've still successfully won your pawn and you've even traded down too, which is a bonus.
true. Yeah.
So
Interesting.
um so yeah, it's something to acknowledge sometimes, especially when you're the one going for tactics.
Mm,
It's very easy to like just focus on what you're doing and not be aware of what the opponent's threats could be
mm,
in these variations and easily miss this checkmate idea. That didn't happen. You played rook f e8. which I think it was kind of a safe move. You saw your knight was it seemed pinned to the bishop, so you wanted to defend your bishop, improve the rook,
Mm.
which is a safe move, still playable. And then things got very sharp after f4.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, it was like I want to move my knight, but I know that they would undefend my bishop. That's what I was
Mm,
thinking. Um, and so I was like, I better defend my bishop before I move my knight anywhere.
gotcha. And then unfortunately, like up until now, the game has been a pretty interesting fight.
Mm.
Um, but after your next move, it's like it was very unfortunate. Like all hope was lost. Um, yeah, because I think you just didn't realize your
I
knight
No,
was
yeah, there was
going
a
into
blunder. I think
e4.
I misclicked there. Yeah,
Hmm.
um, yeah,
Of course, maybe the intention was this.
yeah. I've when I seen you this game, I didn't even realize this was a blunder, like a huge blunder game. I think I was just like, what do I do after the initial structure? That's all I was focused on, really.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and it was a great. I think this was a great example, like the earlier moments.
mm.
Definitely a lot of value you can extract
It's kind of funny
to
actually that I
to
sent
this
you
point.
this. Yeah.
Yes.
You probably were very confused when you got to this point. You should probably just not put your
Well,
queen there.
yeah. I mean, this is actually not so uncommon that
Mm,
like games will end like really tragically, but it's more interesting what happened before, and
yeah.
definitely addressing like the areas that you feel like you need work on, and identifying like your plans, and getting like the best piece placement. Um,
Mm,
and I think a lot of players like they would have a game like this and just like brush it off as like, oh, I made a stupid blunder. Let's just
yeah.
move on and forget about it. But I think if you can extract as much value as possible from
Mm.
these earlier moments, that's what's going to make you a better player.
Yeah, I do try and analyze every game as well because of
Mm-hmm.
that as well. Like yeah, it's always something to improve upon.
Mm-hmm. Um, so yeah, we don't have to relive the pain
No.
so much,
Phew.
but okay. One final question
Mhm.
is: if you can go back in time and not blunder your queen, what would be your move here
Oh,
with
what
black?
was I thinking? Oh my gosh. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what was I thinking? I'm not even sure if I wanted to move my queen. I think I would probably go bishop b5. Oh no, that's defended by the knight. What do I think? I'm pretty sure I wanted to move my knight somewhere, but I can't remember where. And
Mm-hmm.
looking at it now, um,
It's definitely
queen
like a very tense
takes.
position. There's a lot going on. I
Yeah.
mean, there's tension between the pawns, between the bishops, between the queens. So it's one of these positions. Like if you're playing, do you remember the time control of this game?
It's probably 15-10. Yeah.
Okay, so in a game like that, like a lot of your moves will come at like maybe a more fast pace,
Hmm.
but there will be moments in these 15 plus 10 games where the position is like really tense, complicated, where you want to spend like a few minutes really considering your options, and trying to calculate as much as possible.
Hmm.
Um, and this is one of those positions where it's a critical moment. It's easy to go wrong. There are some opportunities. You considered one resource but rejected it. Um,
Yeah, I'm trying
I
to
think
think.
it is important to like be aware of your options here.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Um, yeah, I can't see anything at the moment. Actually, I almost feel like I want to do something with my knight now that I've got the center. Like I've got my both my rooks like set up. I could also put my rook on um, c8, but his attack, like I'm pretty worried about that as well. Because like if I take my pawn, it's not looking the best for me. I don't think because he takes back with his um, rook.
Oh, okay. So taking with pawn, that's another way to blunder your queen.
True. Yeah,
Because
and I lose my queen. Yep.
yeah, so like moves like this that you can consider for a moment, but then
Mm,
hopefully swiftly rejects.
yeah, I almost think just queen takes queen at the moment. But yeah, I don't know. I can't see anything right now.
That's a simple approach. Yeah, that actually it's probably the easiest move to play and safest option where you just take white's going to take back.
Mm.
Then there's less tension between the queens and it might be easier to determine what to do next. Um, I can give you my perspective and probably give you a few more things to think about.
Yeah. What do you think?
Um, actually, I think like the more I'm looking at it, I think this is probably the simplest and easiest to understand.
Mm.
But there are other opportunities which I do want to point out. But if you were to
Mm.
take, and then you take here, you get a situation where you're threatening g5.
Mm.
So if the rook were to take back, you fork
For
the bishop and rook.
yeah.
On top of that, you're opening up the e file for your rook, so this is benefiting you positionally.
Mm.
If white wants to win back this pawn, white would probably have to take your knight first, which then helps activate your bishop. And going forward, like white can win back the pawn, but it's an easier position for you to play.
Yeah, for sure.
It's still equal material, but you have the two bishops, you have constant pressure against this pawn. Your other rook can someday go here and pressure the c file. So I'd probably prefer black here.
Mm.
However, there are like there's still the boomerang tactic. So you
Yeah.
should always be considering the tactics. I think you were thinking maybe a bit more positionally, but like if
Yeah.
you wanted to start with queen takes d3 and then consider the boomerang tactic, takes here,
Mm.
it looks like it's working out.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think Siri heard its name. Be quiet, Siri. Was that Alexa? I don't know. Oh, it's being confused. My iPad is like all the way on the other side of the room and it's eavesdropping. But yeah,
Okay.
knight takes d5. I think is winning a pawn again. This is the
Yeah.
same reason we saw earlier. If white takes, you take back.
Okay. Interesting. I have noticed over the last week that I don't have very good night vision at the moment. Um.
Mm.
Uh. Yeah. My knights seem to be my weakest resources.
Knights are the trickiest pieces to get comfortable with,
Mm.
especially backwards knight moves.
Yeah.
Like sometimes they're the easiest type of move to overlook in chess, especially like stronger players sometimes struggle with this too. Um, so like the probably the best way to overcome it is just by experience, by continually training tactics,
Yeah.
and getting familiar with the patterns.
Yeah. I need some night
Um,
only tactics. Something. Yeah.
right. Yeah. I don't know. I know chess.com has some nice like filtering mechanisms with their tactics trainer where
Hmm.
you can like specifically train different themes. I'm pretty sure Chess Tempo, it sounds like you're using that too,
Mm.
has similar features.
I'm only using chess.com for puzzles at the moment, but I think
Oh,
I'll have a look at some other ones as well.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. Fair
Mm.
enough. Um, I have some fond memories of this boomerang tactic.
Yeah.
One of the most important games I ever played was like a world. I can show you real quick
Yeah, yeah, let's do it.
because it's just a quick example.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much
I was
time
white.
you've got as well, because oh,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, I know we're going over time. I hope that's okay with you.
yeah, no, that's
I mean,
fine.
we can go through the second game and then I
Let's
mean
do it.
maybe go for like another 20-30 minutes.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
only 3 o'clock in the afternoon for me, so
Yeah, these time zones. I get
yeah,
to enjoy the sunlight.
yeah, exactly.
It's about 10:30 for me in the evening, but
Oh,
I'm a night owl anyway, so
yeah,
it's not too bad. Real quick example, just to further reinforce this concept. This is a game I played back in 2011.
mm,
It was my first and only World Youth Championship. It was a World Under 18 Championship, where like the every country, I think the like close to 100 countries were represented,
mm.
um, and like it was very competitive. But I was having a really good event. It was like one of the final rounds. I was on one of the top boards playing a
Awesome.
grandmaster, and I had the white pieces. Some English opening. Opening's not too important.
Mm.
But we got some position like this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then I mean, I was expecting it to be like a really um, like a difficult opening, like thinking my opponent was going to be very well prepared.
Mm.
But in this position, my opponent blundered and played knight e7. And I'll have you find the tactic for white.
Okay.
So it's a bit different position than earlier, but hopefully you see
Yeah, yeah. So we
the
wait.
pattern.
Do we take on e4?
Yeah,
Yeah.
this knight takes e4, and again the bishop's undefended, which is why knight coming from
Ah,
c6
interesting.
was a blunder.
Mm.
So even grandmasters can walk into these simple tactics,
Okay, interesting.
um, which is why they're so important to recognize
Yeah, that's
in
crazy. Yeah.
especially in gameplay. Now the sad part of this story is I did not end up winning the game.
Oh.
Somehow my opponent was down a pawn,
Mm.
and usually at that level, like it should have been like a pretty straightforward win, but my opponent fought like ruthlessly for 4 hours,
Mm.
eventually held the draw,
For four
which is still
hours.
a fine result for me.
What the hell?
Like at least
Four
I didn't
hours?
lose.
How?
Yeah, that was a very long game.
Oh my god! The longest chess game I played is only 25.
Mm.
The 1510 ones.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a big difference between like really competitive chess
Mm.
and online chess. Even when we're seeing like this Magnus Carlsen tour, like
Mm.
they're all playing like rapid and blitz, but in serious over the board competitions, it's very normal for games to average usually from like 3 to 5 hours.
What? What do you guys?
Um,
What do you think about? Is it? Are you just like calculating everything, or?
well, yeah, it's more of like the time control
Mm.
is each player usually gets like 2 hours on their clock to start with, and
Mm.
then there's some kind of increment, like a 30-second increment, and then in some cases they get additional time after playing 40 moves.
Okay.
So there's like it's not so uncommon for there to be like 7 hour games
Wow.
in some of the more serious tournaments. My longest game ever was about 7 hours, and
Wow.
it was pretty brutal.
Yeah, I can
Uh,
imagine. It's like you get food and stuff, or.
so yeah, you have to be prepared like during the game. Yeah, sometimes you bring snacks, or you just have a
Wow.
just a large amount of energy drinks or tea or whatever.
Mm.
But yeah, there's no breaks either, so it's
That's
you
extreme.
really need to be like in very good physical shape
Yeah.
to compete.
It's like it sounds like it's almost like poker. Like I play poker for a bit, and it's
Mm,
yeah, sitting down for that long is it does take a lot of a lot out of you as well. So interesting. Hmm.
yeah, yeah, like, and it's one of the reasons why I enjoy playing more online these days.
Hmm.
Just given that the games are over quickly, there's less stress. It's so easy to burn out after a really long event.
Hmm. Okay.
Anyway, we can move on to game two, which
Yeah, let's do it.
also had some value to it.
Was this
And
the London? I don't know if I. Let's see.
so you had mentioned the London opening. This is like an
Hmm.
opening similar to the London, but not quite. Because it started with
True.
c3 and then bishop g5.
Okay.
Um, and it might be worth talking about more like specific move order you should be playing early on
Hmm.
against d4. I was checking your openings earlier, just kind of across all of your games,
Yeah.
and realizing that you're playing a lot of different things, and
Hmm.
there are some games where you're like the most common move is c4 here,
Yeah. So I was
and
playing the
then
Benoni, and I was enjoying
oh
it.
okay
Yeah. But
okay
I got suggested to try out some different variations or different openings as well.
fair enough, yeah.
Hmm.
And I mean there's a lot of options that you can play. I saw a lot of the games. These may have been older games. You were playing d5,
Yeah.
which is actually not. This is not a recommended move.
Hmm.
Even though it looks natural, like you're fighting for the center, the issue with this is you're trading off a center pawn for a more wing pawn.
Hmm.
Um, and this is a general rule, like early on in the game, center pawns are like the most valuable pawns.
Hmm.
So this is a beneficial trade for white.
Yeah. Okay.
It's one of the reasons why, like when you play Sicilian, one of your goals is to trade this pawn for this pawn.
Mm.
Um, so with that in mind, if white plays c4, you play this. Let's say takes. If you take with queen, you get hit. If you take with knight, you also get hit.
Mm.
So it's usually better either to play d5. You can play d5 on move one,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes you can start with a move after c4. You can play e6 to prepare d5.
Yeah, which is what I'm doing now. I think it's the
Mm.
Nimzo Indian or something.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So this can go into a few openings. The
Mm.
Nimzo is a position after knight c3, bishop b4,
Ah, okay.
which is a very playable opening, has a very solid reputation.
Mm.
Um, if you wanted to, you could still play d5 here. There are kind of overlapping ideas where you're still fighting for the center. Both d5 and bishop b4 prevent white from expanding further in the center with e4.
Okay, true.
Because you're in this case you're pinning the knight.
Mm.
Um, so I don't think I want to like overwhelm you so much with like a very specific opening recommendation,
Mm-hmm.
but I can give you some ideas when, especially against London, it sounds like you did want some
Yeah.
recommendation against that.
Yeah, like I saw
Uh,
your video like with
ah,
Gotham, and
oh sure.
yeah, I because I think I watched both perspectives. I didn't watch all the games, but
Mm-hmm.
I was like, because I was trying to understand it. Whenever I visit London, I just feel really bad. Um,
Mm.
like I,
Ah, that
yeah.
makes
So,
me happy because I'm a huge fan of London.
oh
But
yeah, I
we can try and fix that.
well, it's kind of funny because London is the first thing. Like, I watched PogChamps and I watched Hikaru teaching, um, Leslie. I think it
Oh yeah,
was the
Fusely, yeah.
Fusely. That's it. Yeah, the
Leslie,
London.
yeah,
Yeah,
same
yeah.
same person.
And I was like, oh, this seems really good. Like, this is good. So I'm
Mm.
starting off doing that, and so now when I look at the London, I'm like, I know what they're trying to do, but whenever I try and stop it, I'm almost like too focused on like I've got to stop the knight
Mm.
from getting to like e5 or whatever. Can't remember what it is. I think it's e5.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a square that White's very often controlling
yeah.
quite
So
well in the London.
yeah, so I'm always like really focused on that, and I almost feel like it's a detriment that I learned the London, but I never learned
Mm.
how people beat the
Like
London.
what to do.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, it's an annoying opening because it's hard to actually like fully stop.
Mm.
And sometimes you just have to allow whites to get their setup and you do your own thing as well. Good news is there's a lot of different responses that black can play.
Mm.
You just have to have some sort of plan in mind because it can be very easy to just not not have any idea and be outside your comfort zone and then collapse later on if you don't have a plan.
Mm.
So very often like against d4, if white's going to play the London, white will either play this move or this move.
Mm.
Or in this case, white played c3, which is also maybe an attempt to still get this setup.
Yeah.
My recommendation for you is if white plays anything other than c4, so if white plays this or this or this,
Mm-hmm.
you should strike in the center immediately with d5.
Okay. Cool.
Um, and that way you're not committing to e6. And
Mm.
the benefit for that is you're keeping some option open for your light squared bishop
Okay.
to
Cool.
develop a bit more actively.
Mm.
So if we imagine like the most common London move order is bishop c5 or bishop f4, you play d5.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's say white continues doing their London thing. There's a few recommendations I can give, but I'll give you the one that I recommend to most players. And this is kind of like an opening setup, which I think is very effective against white setup.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is to play a bit more ambitiously with starting with c5 and then knight c6.
Okay.
It's the most harmonious development. A lot of players make the mistake of playing knight c6 too early,
Mm.
and then their knight is just restricted by white's pawns, and it's very hard to actually do much with this knight because white's controlling like the key squares
Yeah.
the knight can go to.
Interesting.
So if you play knight c5, or if you play pawn c5 and then knight c6, then there's more ability to apply pressure to the center.
Mm.
On top of that, you have the idea of queen b6 to apply even more pressure to d4 and also attack b2.
True. Yeah.
Which is one of the main targets in white's position currently.
I see. I see. Okay, that's interesting.
So one thing to keep in mind, and this is, I mean, it's a very typical kind of opening idea, is that if white gets greedy and takes your pawn, there was nothing defending the pawn for black.
Mm.
Most players won't do this. Most London players will just like instinctively just do this London setup. But if they do take your pawn, it's easy to win back. If you really wanted to, you can win it back right away with queen a5, just double attack.
True.
The move I like to play is e6.
Yeah, that's the one I'm used to doing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, where you just want to take it back with the bishop, and then like going forward, you'll have two center pawns, and white only has one center pawn.
Mm. Yeah.
So if white plays e3, this is already like a easier position to play. Your bishop is a little bit stuck here, but maybe later you can prepare e5
Mm-hmm.
and free open the bishop.
Yeah, that looks good.
I'm
yeah.
yeah.
Because
So
usually
I'm trying
people...
to be like thorough here.
Yeah. No, that's good. But yeah, it's because usually people don't take with when they're playing the London A. So like,
right.
Yeah.
So there's one more thing to address in this variation is what if white plays b4?
Oh,
because this looks a little bit annoying. Like you can't quite win back the pawn. It looks like white's going to defend the pawn. In a situation like this, you can very nicely undermine the structure by using your own pawns and starting with this move a5.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm used to this.
That way,
Yeah, because
that way you're attacking the base.
Yeah, I play the Queen's Gambit a lot.
Okay, so this is very typical. Yeah. It should remind you of like a Queen's Gambit accepted, where if white plays this, you take, there's a pin. If white plays c6 or c3, there's a nice idea you can take, and then you continue undermining this structure with b6. And you're pretty much guaranteed to win back a pawn here. Because you're attacking this twice. If white takes, you're going to take this with check and then easily pick up b6 with a better position.
Yeah. Awesome.
So this is not something you'll run into like maybe ever, because almost no one does this, but it's good to understand because like some of the ideas could carry over to like similar types of positions.
Yeah.
And the concept of undermining pawns, especially taking advantage of overextended pawns, it is relevant to other situations. So if we see like what to do against like the typical London player, let's say white plays e3, you can continue developing. Just put your knight here. You know your knight's going to come here. Usually white will play c3. And notice you have not committed to e6 because you're still keeping the option open for your bishop. The move that I like to recommend here is actually not developing your bishop, but immediately going for this.
Okay, cool.
And it might be worth actually like committing this to memory. Of course, understanding the purpose behind each move, but if you remember the setup and you play it against these London players that maybe you're running into quite often, it can pose immediate issues for white, where white has to decide how to defend the pawn. If white plays queen b3, then you're very happy to play this move c4. And you actually want white to take your queen.
True, yeah.
And you would very gladly accept double pawns. Because they're hard to actually exploit, and you have the half open a file. And this is I play this position myself. I think it's very pleasant. Your bishop can later develop. You'll get e6, and then you have the idea of pushing your b pawn later. So
I like this.
I don't want to overwhelm you with so much, but I do want to give you like at least a general setup, general plan.
Yeah, because I definitely, versus the London, I definitely try to play c5, and then I know that there is that moving my queen out to b6, but I think lately, because I've had so much just I haven't had any success with London. I've just been trying out random things, which is probably definitely not the best way to go. But what happens if they push because they have a few of the options, right? What happens if they push like the B2 pawn?
Oh, sure. So after queen b6, and sorry, I was just getting distracted. Got another raid from the legendary Hafu, which we all have to congratulate Hafu on some really thrilling play today against David Pacman. Thanks for raiding. I appreciate that. So if you're just joining, this is kind of a chess lesson collaboration. A lot of people have been asking if you're playing in PogChamps, which maybe you'll be a future PogChamps participant. Anyway, sorry, can you repeat your question? Oh, you just went on mute. I don't know what happened.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
you missed
no
it.
worries.
Yeah, B3. If they push B3,
Sure.
what do I do with my queen?
Yeah, so your queen kind of just chills here, where you can't quite win the pawn, but white can't exploit your queen. And here you can just continue development. The move that I would recommend is bishop g4, where you just pin the knight, you're going for e6, bishop e7 castling. And it's a very solid position. Like, you're not going to be winning anything, but all your pieces have like really nice harmony. And like later on in the game, you can play rook c8 and pressure the c file, and there should really be no serious issues for you.
Okay. Okay, cool.
So I have a video, not on my YouTube channel, but on the St. Louis Chess Club YouTube channel, going into this more depth, which I can send you, or you can just
I'll find it.
Google.
Yeah. I'll find it.
Yeah, it's called Black Wins Against 1d4. Right, I go over some different openings and especially what to do against London.
Give me one sec.
Yeah, go for it.
I'll just write it down.
Yeah, no worries.
Awesome. All right. Okay, Black wins.
So yeah, London, like it's such a common opening, especially for newer players. I know, like a lot of people are playing it in this PogChamps event. A lot of people just Google like what opening to play for whites, and London is a very common recommendation. But if you know this line, that'll save you a lot of headaches in the future.
Okay, cool.
So going back to your game, it was a bit different because your opponent played c3. So if you were run into this again, just play d5 and basically go for a very similar setup. And it would still be effective if white ends up developing the bishop to one of these squares. In this game, you play e6, which is a completely fine move, but it doesn't lead to the same kind of energy that you have otherwise because your bishop can't develop this way. And usually when you play this move, you're going for a fianchetto, which you didn't actually go for in the game. And let's see what happened in the game, because as another example, like you made a few kind of subtle mistakes like in the opening, and then everything crumbled by the early middle game.
Yeah, I think I have nightmares from this one. I think this is why I sent it to you. I was like, I need to start having nightmares about this game. It was mainly to do with pawn placement, or those are the questions I had.
Yeah, and so far, like, it's still completely fine. I mean, what you're doing, you're being efficient with development. You're playing a bit safe, but yeah, it's all okay. Yeah, d5's playable. If you wanted to, you could castle right away. Personally, I'm not a big fan of d5. I would be more inclined to keep this pawn back because I know the bishop wants to come here, and d5 would block the diagonal.
True.
So, like a better move might just be b6, and then you can get a setup with bishop b7, castling, maybe d6, knight d7. And even though like maybe it's a little bit more passive than usual, all your pieces have like really nice squares. Your bishop has a nice open diagonal. Everything's super solid. So this goes back to the concept of like piece harmony, making sure every piece, especially your minor pieces, have a good home.
Interesting. Yeah, because I know I did think about in this game going bishop a6, um,
Okay.
and trading off the light square bishop because I know how
Hmm.
much the light squared bishop it means to a London player.
Yeah, it's like the bread and butter. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was thinking about doing that, but in the game I think I decided to. I mean, I decided against it. Um, yeah, but
Yeah, and I don't know if you had an opportunity to, because
mm,
some other things came up.
okay.
Um, and white took. So this is actually a move you're kind of happy to see, because usually white should keep the pawn on d4.
Mm,
White traded. The drawback for you, you did have to spend another turn with your bishop,
mm,
so it did kind of slow down your development. Um, but I think it's still fine. Like your plan should be to just complete development and eventually get this move in e5.
yeah, true.
We see bishop d3. And then one of the main mistakes you made this game was moving this bishop a bit too many times.
Mm,
If we see the next few moves for you, you ended up playing bishop d6, which it's centralizing the bishop, but it wasn't necessary.
mm,
Then later, I see on move 12, you played bishop c7, and you kind of neglected castling your king, and you neglected developing your other bishop.
yeah.
So sometimes early on in the game, you want to be a bit more efficient with your pieces.
Mm.
And there's this kind of general rule. It's not necessarily a hard rule, but there is a principle that you should avoid moving the same piece twice
Yeah, I've heard that one as well.
if there's no good reason for it.
Yeah, I definitely get tunnel vision where I'm like, I get an
Mm-hmm.
idea and I'm like, how do I execute this idea? And I think
Mm,
I was just like, how do I get rid of this bishop pin?
mm,
And I was like, oh, if I go to d6, then I can play h6, and then the bishop has to move away, and then um, I can't even remember what the rest of my plan was here, but
mm-hmm.
there was
Yeah,
a
I'm
there
trying
was
to
a
figure it out
I
too.
think I was like, I'm gonna castle queenside. Oh, all of my attention was on this bishop for
Mm,
some reason in this game, because I was like, oh, I can pull and push the g pawn, and then if my bishop's already on d6, then he can't, like, if he goes to the g file, then I can just take, and it was just,
oh,
I
so
don't know.
I think you were kind of overthinking it,
Yeah, for sure, I was 100% overthinking it. Yeah,
where like the thought process can just be like, okay, castle and play e5 and develop your other bishop. Like, may just
yeah,
yeah, white's bishop pinning your knight. It's annoying, but white can't really exploit it,
mm,
and then you don't really have to worry beyond that. Um, so like if you wanted to, you could play e5 immediately. I think this is a pretty interesting move, where you're threatening e4,
yeah,
and then you're activating your other bishop. Unfortunately, the play ended up being a bit slow, starting with bishop d6.
mm-hmm.
We see queen c2. Okay, h6 is fine. Bishop h4, and now you play knight e5,
Mm,
which it's an interesting move, but it kind of, I think it benefited white more than it benefited you.
mm,
Maybe for a couple reasons. This move actually it gave white initiative because white was one to capture, and then your bishop was a target. White attacked your bishop again, and then you had to retreat. And if we just reflect on the first 12 moves,
mm.
you moved your bishop. Your first bishop move was bishop e7.
Oh god.
Then you took the pawn,
Mm.
and then you moved back. Then you took on e5. Then you moved back.
Oh wow.
Some of these moves, like you had to play because you were recapturing.
Oh, yeah.
But like in the meantime, white was being a bit more efficient, and just got ahead in development.
Yeah, that's like the invisible wooden shield.
Yeah, yeah. We
Something
see
like
the
that.
x2c
Yeah.
cross.
Oh
This
god.
can maybe give you some more nightmares.
Yeah.
But the other reason why knight e5 is maybe a slight mistake
Mm.
is because you have two center pawns, you have more potential for gaining space.
Mm.
In general, a player with more space does not want to trade minor pieces. They want to keep minor pieces on the board. Imagine you play e5 right away,
That makes sense.
then white's a bit more cramped.
Mm.
Your pawns just restrict like all these squares. On top of that, these two pieces are targets. You're threatening e4.
Mm.
White could respond with e5, e4 himself. This is probably the best move, but this it would be a lot more pleasant compared to what happened in the game.
Yeah, 100%.
And
Yeah.
also maybe castle first, and then later go for e5.
Yeah. Well, this is good because it's making me realize that I have all of these ideas that I know London players like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I just all I am is I'm just like focusing on stopping them. That's it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
I know that I think the reason I did this is because I was like, oh well, if he gets his knight to e5 at all, then he's gonna want to move his other knight to f3, and then he gets he'd be able to have a permanent outpost there, later on down the line.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, if I can stop the knight from getting, okay, if I can get the knight out now, then he can't play
You
that
just
in the
trade it
future.
off, right?
Yeah, but you can see the problem here, right? It's just like I'm
Maybe overthinking things a bit too
yeah,
much,
for sure.
or going down kind of the wrong rabbit hole. Yeah,
Yeah,
here you're controlling e5. There's never a situation,
exactly.
especially without the pawn on d4 for white, where
Mm,
the knight can effectively come here.
yeah.
Ironically, what happened in the game, once you got this position, the knight now has a clear path to e5.
Yeah, it's yeah,
So,
it's definitely like I'm just thinking about concepts I wouldn't want to happen, and I'm not even really thinking about like why these pieces should move where they are. Like I'm not even thinking about any calculations or anything. I'm just like I don't want
mhm.
this piece to go here. Um, yeah, it's very strange actually. I'm not sure where that came from, but it's good to be able to see, so I can prevent that from happening.
For sure. Yeah, no, like I think it's easier to see in hindsight too
Mm,
when you're able to like fully reflect on what happened.
mm,
Sometimes in the heat of the game, you'll have an idea, you're really invested in that idea, but then afterwards you realize, oh, it wasn't the best path, and that's where the most kind of amount of learning can take place.
exactly. I wonder if that's actually a common theme for people that play. Like, say if they do learn a specific opening, because London was the first opening I learned. Like
Mm-hmm.
whether or not they're like they invest too much in stopping the ideas that they know are really strong for their opponent. Like without considering, without actually playing the game that they're playing. They're playing past games.
Sometimes there will be tendencies where you're just like you're on autopilot. Um, at least with certain openings where you just focus on what you want to do, you're not paying attention to what your opponent wants to do.
Mm,
But yeah, very often you have to react in different situations, and and yeah, be like pay very close attention to how the position's changing and what makes sense given like all the factors.
mm,
So this is another position where like it was already kind of unpleasant for you.
yeah.
White castled here, so white's like fully completed development, like castled. This pawn structure, like it looks a little bit weird, but it is kind of restricting your pawns,
Mm,
and you're a bit behind development. Now, it was a situation where it wasn't clear where your king should go.
mm,
Um, I think you maybe made the realization that if you castle kingside, this is incredibly risky.
mm,
You didn't castle, which was probably a good decision. Um, but then it just wasn't clear what to do. And this kind of stemmed from your mistakes earlier.
mm.
Just to show if you do castle, this move is very strong. G5 coming, and you're like with the knight being pinned. This is really really unpleasant for black,
Mm,
especially because like most of your pieces are not helping defend the king side.
yeah.
So you played bishop b6, which was yet another bishop move.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, that was another example. Like you're attacking the pawn,
Mm,
but the pawn was easily defended. I'm
mm.
not sure if it really helped you that much.
Yeah, well, this is like what I mentioned in the last game as well. When I
Mm-hmm.
see an undefeated piece that can be easily defended, I just go for it when I don't know what to do.
Gotcha.
Mm,
Yeah, it was more a matter of like finding a better square for this bishop, trying to resolve the problem with the pin. It's not easy, really not easy to find like an energetic plan for black here.
mm,
Um, I mean, really, you really want to improve this bishop somehow. I'm guessing it probably makes the most sense to just go for castling queenside,
yeah.
because it's the area of the board where white has the least potential to attack, because white's king is also on the queen side. So the plan might be just bishop d7, queen e7, castle, and try and like hold your ground.
Mm.
And maybe your bishop can eventually go to c6, where it has some influence towards e4. But there's not much you can really attack here, and you really just have to focus on your biggest issues, which is your king and completing development.
Mm-hmm.
But bishop b6, and then very soon we see just a complete collapse. Now you play g5, which can be like, this is one of my favorite moves because it's like it's exciting,
Yeah.
but in this position it's just it's self-destructive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So I remember this one very clearly because I was like,
mhm.
I didn't really know what to do, but I was like, oh, if I take here, then I can win a pawn on like h2 or something. But it kind of I stopped all my calculation there, and I didn't see that if he just moves rook to h1, then and takes occur, then my queen's trapped. Sorry, yeah, but I was sorry. He can win my queen, because he can check my king, and it just falls apart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically what happened in the game. Yeah, it all like yeah, it was just not a good
No.
transformation for black. I think the biggest issue was when you play g5, you're weakening your knight,
Mm.
and white was still able to maintain the pin. And even if white doesn't have rook h1,
Mm.
there's rook f1, and your knight's pinned and just attacked too many times.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
So again, it kind of reminds me of the previous game where like the position became difficult from like some subtle mistakes, not quite fully knowing what to do in the opening, playing a bit passively, and then when the position became difficult, then it was just much easier to make just a self-destructive blunder.
Mm.
Now you're still alive here, and the better approach rather than playing g5 is to go for the same plan I mentioned, probably start with bishop d7 and then really try to castle queenside.
Mm.
You maybe even can afford queen c7, where you allow this, and then you accept double pawns just to try and simplify matters and get your king safe.
Yeah, so that was like one of the biggest things that I noticed from this game as well. It's like I really was against double pawns here, and I'm not sure why. It's like it's almost like my only because I considered it a lot of times, and I was like, I just really don't want them.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where that comes from either. It's like I've got a lot of like things that have been built in,
suppressed memories from
yeah, I've
terrible experiences.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, double pawns are not always a bad thing, and there are like some advantages. Also, if white were to take, it's kind of a concession because then you have the bishop pair,
Yeah,
which inherently is better than bishop and knight. And you can make the argument that like these double pawns are not so weak because it's hard to immediately exploit. You strengthen your center, and like you still have the plan of castling. So if white wanted to really try and exploit you, white can maybe go for this move, and then it does require like accurate play to not be losing here, because white just wants to open the e-file and punish your king.
True.
And if you take, then your pawn can actually maybe be exploited. Bishop b5 coming. There's a lot to worry about from this position. So if e4 were played, you'd have maybe a tricky decision to make. I'll go ahead and say I think the best move is probably d4, where you just keep the file closed and you're really trying to trade queens.
Yeah.
Where if takes, you take the queen, you win back your pawn, then you're alive and you don't even need to castle. Your king can hop to e7, and then you complete development.
Interesting. Okay.
So I know that's going maybe a bit deeper, beyond what you can think about from this position, but hopefully it gives you some sense of how you could have improved.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely. Even just seeing how many times that bishop moved around, like, it makes me wonder, like, because I think this happens a lot when I play black. Because as white, I know that with the queen's gambit, like I feel like I have an efficient move order because I feel like I win a lot when I play white. But with black, I don't feel like I don't even know how I win any games.
Mm.
To be honest with black,
Well, okay,
I'm just
most
saying this.
games are not determined in the opening.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's how I
So
think I've been winning. I think I've just been like scrapping at the end and like finding weird, weird tactics or just like I have no idea. But
which is a very good sign. Yeah, I
mm,
mean, if like if you're just focusing on minimizing blunders and uh, and just keeping the game going against a lot of players, if you're just patient
mm,
and you wait for the right opportunities, that's how you can win a lot of games in chess.
yeah,
And really, up until the 1700 level, um, if you can just follow general principles, minimize mistakes, get out of the opening alive, it's surprising how many games you can win just by kind of being solid.
mm,
Um, but yeah, it would be good to perhaps work on this earlier stage, and I hope I gave you some ideas to
yeah, 100%.
kind
Yeah,
of continue with.
yeah. I'm excited. I
Um,
can. Yeah, I definitely have. I mean, I think just those things. Knowing now that
mhm,
my openings are just inefficient, and I'm putting myself behind from the get go. Like I'm almost like doing the Dragon Ball Z like weight trading thing,
mhm.
because of my opening, and just that is gonna make me. Yeah, I'm gonna be looking at pro games now, like like how you suggested, and I'll be able to just find some ones that I really like and find some efficiencies that I can employ
Yeah, that would be
immediately.
definitely a good starting point.
Mm,
And then just getting experience, like kind of sticking to the same set of openings for white and black, and then getting experience, seeing what you're running into most often,
mm.
and then expanding your knowledge, and still not like just purely memorizing the specific lines to play, but really kind of internalizing the ideas can definitely get you further along.
Yeah. Well, even just coming at it from that perspective of efficiency, like what do I want later on in the game, and like how can it's almost like I want to be as efficient as possible without my opponent be able to exploit it.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think having those things in mind will help a lot. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, so I'll be happy to maybe have another session where we can go over more specific openings. 'Cause I know this was more focused on like principles and especially like what happened in these two games.
Mm.
But it could be interesting, not only for you but also for people watching in the chat, just to have some like clear direction with perhaps what openings to choose. Sometimes what I like to do with people that I work with is you can maybe explore what openings that you want to pursue, and then we can talk about those a bit more in depth
Okay. Yeah.
sometime in the future.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, and I really appreciate the time that we had together today. So,
Oh, it's my
but
pleasure.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was
no,
good.
it's
It was good.
fun.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really interesting working, especially like because you have like just this experience from Starcraft, and you kind of understand what it takes to get really good at something. I think that this discussion we had earlier was definitely very insightful. Um, I do have like a list of questions, but maybe we can
I mean, I've got
have
time.
more discussions like later on.
Yeah, yeah. No, that sounds good. I got time for some now if you want. If you do have any, but yeah, it's up to you.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna wrap things up on my end because I'm getting tired. But
No worries.
I think we did cover a lot, and
We did. Yeah.
should definitely set up something
All right.
further down the road. Are you gonna keep streaming?
Um, I'm not sure because I was talking about this earlier.
Hmm.
Like I need to go through that stage of taking a break, um,
Sure.
so that I can like just settle all the stuff because at the moment
Fair enough.
I'm just going downhill. But I mean, I could keep streaming and have like viewer games or do fun games and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I'm
I'm
down
just
for that.
asking because I'm probably gonna stream for another like 10-15 minutes.
Mm.
And if you're gonna keep streaming and you'd like a raid, I'd be happy to send over a raid, but it's completely up to you.
I mean that'd be awesome. That'd help the channel out a
Okay.
lot. So yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Mm.
sure. Yeah, because I know you're trying to, of course, you're trying to get to 1700, but you're trying to like have a community too. So
Exactly.
that sounds good. So I'm going to wrap things up with my chat. I know there's a lot of questions being asked which have not gotten to. But yeah, this has been awesome. This has been really awesome, and best of luck with your future games.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Catch you later. Have
All
a
right,
good rest of the stream.
thanks. You too. Bye.
See ya.